So here we are, this is it. This is the final eclipse in Scorpio this season of eclipses, this cycle of eclipses. So we're finishing out a major phase of astrology here, this first eclipse season in 2023. It's a big deal because now eclipses begin shifting through the rest of this year. Really a transition year 2023 is. But let's break it all down. Let's see what this eclipse may be bringing and look at some of the astrology that will come after. Stay tuned. So welcome here, this is S.J. Anderson. Thanks for coming to my channel. Here I break down the ongoing astrology. We're here in the land between eclipses with Mercury retrograde. I don't know about you, but it's been a little bit slow going at times. It's been a little bit of a slog, as they say, trying to work through some of this energy, particularly as Mercury sort of deepened into this retrograde feel. And I do think there's something about the second eclipse and eclipse season. Often when these eclipses are paired, that second one can be a culmination of the whole season of eclipses, that whole 2-week to 4-week period, because we're grinding away with nodal activation and, you know, it's almost over. Just everybody out there, keep that in mind, where I think things will begin picking up greatly here into May and June with some of the best astrology of the year. And in this video, I'm going to break down the eclipse chart, but also look at some of the astrology that arrives after. And you can always find in my videos the chapters that I'm scheduling. So for example, I'm going to talk a whole lot about Taurus and Jupiter and Taurus because that happens in between this lunar eclipse and the next new moon in Taurus. You'll have these major astrological changes. I'm going to break a few of those down here. So the major feature here is the Mars-Moon mutual reception. You have the eclipsed moon in Scorpio being ruled by Mars in Cancer. Cancer, of course, is the sign of the moon. The domicile ruler of Cancer is the moon. So they're in this fusion of support between these two symbols. And the moon navigates these potential minefields of Scorpio, and then it's also getting eclipse. So the moon's under quite a lot of pressure in this chart. And so it's flipping back to Mars saying, hey, Mars, help, help. And Mars is saying, hey, I need your help too. There might be a sense of reliance here, but reliant on an unreliable partner, and they're both kind of commiserating. Sometimes we can think about two planets that are in detriment or fall in a mutual reception as joining in misery in a certain way. And misery loves company. I mean, that's the classic phrase. When you have a challenging time, it's great to have someone to share it with or to go through those challenges together because you can support each other. Being alone and suffering can be often a lot more difficult than suffering with another person. It does deepen relationship. So you might think about this eclipse season, the people you're around, the people you're navigating these energies through, the kind of cohesion building or the togetherness that when astrology gets intense, it often does bind folks. The first person I ever met who was a professional astrologer before I was even into astrology deeply, and that's what she told me. She said, look for transits. Oftentimes people meet and join to go through a transit together. And I think the example she used was two people with the same Jupiter sign, maybe 12 years apart, meeting to deal with like a Jupiter square, hitting their shared natal Jupiter placement. And so I think eclipse season can often be like that. People that have emerged around you or the fated, characters that have come into the play of your reality to abide by and navigate through these kind of challenge. It's embedded in the fact that there's a mutual reception here. I got these birds singing. I love it. Every day when I wake up now, these birds are out there singing and celebrating, and I really very much welcome them. I think it fits with the Taurus theme that you'll see here later in the video, the nature and natural world component to it all. And as I so often do on this channel, I love to bring the texts in. This book by Elliott, The Essential Guide to Practical Astrology, it's a great text. It's a foundational text. There's no perfect astrology book, no book that covers everything you'll ever need to know as you study astrology, but some of them are darn good, I think, particularly with the breadth of coverage that Miss Kent brings to this text. I want to read her statement here on lunar eclipses. She says, similarly, at a lunar eclipse, our ability to transmit and receive light, which is what the moon does, to channel and midwife divine inspiration, is trumped by the impulses of pure worldliness. Remember, during a lunar eclipse, the earth gets in between the sun and the moon. And so the earth blocks out that light from the sun that the moon then reflects back down to us. That's why it gets red in a so-called blood moon. And she says here, sometimes it's the worldliness of physical disease or limitation that casts a long shadow, other times the pain of earthly need and loss. And again, what she's hitting here on are the themes of the moon. The moon is the body, the mother, and the nurture, and of course the transmitter and receiver of light. During an eclipse, those things can be under pressure, so you're talking about physical disease. That's classic moon under pressure. Pain, physical pain when the moon is under pressure. We feel pain, we can feel emotional pain, we can feel the pain of the changeability of reality. The moon is that constant changing force. And so there may be the pains of the changes of eclipse season, feeling into the challenge and the suffering and the pain, the sweet nostalgia of the past as we see the present die and we know this is it. I mean, I think about earlier, we were talking about pairing with people to navigate transits and the fated emergences of individuals. There's a real sweetness to that. You may never ever see another person ever again. And it's the specialness of this moment of time, and as fate unfolds, the people we love, the people that are even just with us for a conversation, there's like a built-in nostalgia. Love and connection is painful because it's all going to go away, right? And I feel like eclipses, and I don't mean to sound so dark here. I think I'm trying to be, honest with how when we have an eclipse moon and we feel the pains of change and the pains of life that result from change, we have to honor and acknowledge pain. And she continues here, usually it's a pain you recognize because there's an 18-year eclipse cycle. This is very wise. That's why when I did my last video, I'm constantly breaking down. Look to 2004. That's the last time we had a really resonant eclipse to the solar eclipse we just had. And similarly, there was a lunar eclipse in Scorpio in 2004, May. So we're back to 2004, and we're back to that pocket, that window, 2004, 2005, 2006. It really can help to reflect on those because it helps us process the echoes of pain and the triggering of the nativity, our core, maybe faded pains in our charts. These cycles bring those to the fore, and then she mentions here the opposite spot every 9 years or so. So I did that in the last video. You can check it out. It's a little different each time. And then she says, as the lunar eclipse, an antidote to these earthly difficulties seems to lie in the celebration of Earth's healing, stabilizing powers. And I think that's very wise, that the Earth is what's separating the sun and the moon. The Earth is what's blocking the luminaries from connecting in that syzygy, that eclipse syzygy. And so there's something in an eclipse moment, particularly lunar, where we think about the Earth, the element of the Earth, the nature of the material, in terms of being of the Earth. We all are, right? We're a spirit in a physical body. We're half spirit, half mammal, half animal, half of this tangible 3D, you might say, that the soul has incarnated into. I know some of you are probably like, SJ, that's too new age and too tripped out. That's fine, just let it go. I think no matter your cosmology or your beliefs about the world, you can understand that there is a physical form that we engage with at all times. The food I'm eating comes from the earth. Every day we have to relate to and engage with the physicality of the material reality that's inevitable. It's this idea of the reflection side of the connecting function being diminished. The moon is the connector as it moves from planet to planet and aspect to aspect. It connects points in the transiting sky with each other. It activates our natal chart. If that's diminished, there might be a sense of not feeling connected, not being able to know those connections as strongly. So it's almost like the radar is diminished, or the signal gets turned down or weak during a lunar eclipse. So I'm pointing this out so we can acknowledge it as we get here later in the week. So I'm going to release this hopefully 48 to 36 hours before the eclipse. But those who are watching it right away, just know, if you're feeling diminished connection, Mercury's retrograde, it's a lunar eclipse. I plan to just turn down my life. I want to just rest. I always like sleeping during eclipses now, or just resting. So next, rooting into the earth to find that body self-light, that which is innate in the animal side. And that's what I think sleeping is really good, because that's an animal need. That's a tending to the body need. As the symbol of the body, which is the moon, is being eclipsed, we can kind of come into our actual physical needs in the moment and just try to give extra care and tending to those physical needs. And I say here, tending to the natural selves as needed. So that's a major theme here. I think it fits with more the lunar eclipses, often more than the solar, getting into the needs of the body. and making sure you're loving your body as best as you can and protecting it and being safe with it, particularly with Mars. Mars is a force of violence, symbolically. And so you have this Moon-Mars loop. The moon in Scorpio is a challenge symbol. And we might need to be safe, pause, cautious, and very nurturing. Double dose of nurturance with a lunar eclipse in Scorpio. So back to the cycle talk, the eclipses in Scorpio are now winding down. There are no more eclipses in Scorpio after this 5 May lunar eclipse. It happens here at 7:30 in Central Europe. So these transactions of facts are in a completion or resolution phase, possibly. And you can just go back. First eclipse in Scorpio, 16 May 2022. 25 October 2022, and now 5 May 2023. Those are the Scorpio eclipses. The South Node in particular has been in Scorpio 18 January 2022 to 7 July 2023. So while this is the last eclipse, the node is going to take some more time to leave Scorpio. And then, of course, the final eclipse on the axis is this Taurus eclipse in October. By 14 October, no more eclipses in fixed signs, and the nodes are not there. And you may be feeling the Scorpio sector of the chart gets a little bit more freedom from this stuff before the Taurus sector. But either way, just keep in mind these dates. At a minimum, November, December, by 2024, we're totally refreshed out of this eclipse cycle. Considering the cycles is important because often this can be quite literal. You might look back, yes, January 2022, that happened, and I've been dealing with this, and now it seems to be lingering or lessening. It fits exactly this eclipse timing. Wow, this is the great power of astrology, is the clock, the symbolic clock in the sky that matches exactly with the manifestation in our reality, sometimes very, very scarily in terms of how exact it is. Of course, that's why I'm a professional astrologer, because I see it every day, all day, and know the power of it. But every time you see it anew, it's like, wow, really? Is that literal? These moments do get engendered. So that's why I offer this, think back into your life and try to map these cycles with the transactions of facts in your reality. Let's do even more deep symbolic analysis here. I want to talk about the Malefic water trine that's coming to a peak. Remember, Mars entered Cancer on 25 March, I believe 26 March, and Mars then formed a water trine with both Saturn and Mars in these water signs trining each other. Supportive trine, but Mars maybe being a little weak, and Saturn, totally new territory, first time it's been in Pisces since the mid-90s. And I say here, maybe one of disconnection and jostlement. More than anything, it's an eclipse. So I've talked already about this, but just be prepared. I want to give voice into this video, what I'm trying to do. Often I'm very positive. I mean, I'm known as a positive hype-up astrologer, and I love that. But I really do, my intention is to try to be honest, more than anything. And you can't talk about a Scorpio lunar eclipse with a South Node ruled by Mars and Cancer without saying, well, hey, this may be a little challenged and difficult and disconnected. I've done plenty of that, but I want to just come speak again about it here. But part of it is Saturn in Pisces, final first phase of newness. So it's its final moment here in this first phase of Saturn in Pisces, which had Jupiter in Aries. Jupiter ingresses into Taurus and ends this first phase of Saturn in Pisces. So in many ways, this eclipse, given this water trine and flowing water trine, it's a good time to say too, hey, Saturn in Pisces has been challenging or difficult. Think about how that's been. If you've had a Saturn return, or if it's been a little strange since early March. I mean, the outer world is very clear. I've talked about AI a ton. Every day I get online, it's new things. New companies are failing. I just saw this week. I think Chegg, this is a company. The stock just went to zero because AI is replacing it. And so there's a whole shifting alteration of the structures and foundations of reality that we're living through. There's some more bank failures recently. The war in Ukraine is expanding and changing and still operative and still there. A lot of uncertainty and unknowns, which is a very Piscean theme. And so, that can be disconnecting and jostling to be in such an unknown space. And I think this eclipse hones in on that, because Saturn and Pisces, the way it's pivoting with Mars and the moon. Now, these are supportive trines, but the eclipse means we have to keep a realistic view of how this may be manifesting. And malefics are malefics. I mean, Mars is Mars, Saturn is Saturn. Mars, those significations often aren't the easiest planets to be working with. I also have here, so Jupiter's not aspecting Saturn. That's part of the weakness there, with Saturn not being able to rely on the domicile lord through reception. And then Mercury is retrograde and under the beams in this chart. Blocked, what's happening, what's reality, who knows what's going on. There's a confusion that's part and parcel with Mercury retrograde. That's embedded here too. So I'm going to keep here on these themes of what I call here giving voice with this eclipse to negatives along the delineation continuum. I think it's important here. I just feel like if there ever was a chart, this is one to talk about the Scorpionic. It's a Scorpio lunar eclipse. Scorpio is going into the deep realities of painful, often painful things. It's the nature of Scorpio. And every symbolic energy in an astrological chart has a continuum of delineation. That's what I mean here. Sometimes they're so-called negative, sometimes they're more positive. And I'm just starting here to brush up on some of these so-called negative sides because I think it's useful given the symbolism. Let me just go through them quickly. Mars in Cancer, blocks because of home life and body. That's what Mars in Cancer can do. We aren't able to act because we have drama at home, or the home life is demanding that we stay in the home and feed that part of the unfoldment, and then we can't go out into the other world. I mean, when the home life is messed up, it's very hard to have a career or have a successful career, have a school life that works. You know, if you ever had bad roommates, it messes everything up, or a bed that doesn't work and you can't get a good night's rest, or no water in the home, you have to try to shower outside the home. These are all like Mars and Cancer themes that are more on the negative side of the delineation. Saturn and Pisces, in a sea of confusion without rudder or resource. This is what I was describing earlier with the changes in the outer world. There's a lot of this sea of unknown and maybe not that deep knowing rudder that's been established quite yet. And then Moon in Scorpio, trauma, bodily or emotional. And that's why the Scorpio moon, I always bring up the Altamont concert with the Rolling Stones. If you read that Rolling Stone article, the magazine article about Altamont, when that person was killed, they say it right in the article. They were like, any astrologer, I think this is the quote, would have known the moon in Scorpio is not a good election for that concert. And so it's just classic Astro 101. Moon in Scorpio can be of the nature of bodily trauma or emotional trauma. So these are the negatives that, I'm saying this not to negative project on your eclipse experience. If you're having a really smooth eclipse season, great. But I want to bring this side of the chart out because it is, I think, one of the charts most likely to have value in exploring these so-called challenges. That's the Scorpionic. So part of it is that I want to do the Scorpio stuff while we have a moon in Scorpio that's eclipsed. It's a good time to explore this. And every placement, even those of you out there that have like Jupiter and Sagittarius, the best placement right on your ascendant born during the day or whatever, you can explore the negative side, so-called, of that placement. You know, too much obsession about, belief systems or whatever, that continuum might bring some negatives. Those explorations can be quite useful because it provides context. Sometimes people will be like, yeah, I actually do struggle with that side of the continuum. It's hard to know as an astrologer which side, so-called positive, so-called negative, is how that symbolism will manifest in the life of someone. So I do find it useful just to give voice and coverage to have a totality of expression, potential expression of any given moment in time or any given nativity. So that all said, and now you're going to get kind of normal SJ, where what do I have here? The so-called positives can often start from these more challenging sides. The eclipse can bring epiphanies and reframing, epiphanies of reframing. So I think with this eclipse, what I've done is start with one side of the continuum, but look how easy it is to explore a symbolic continuum. With Mars in Cancer, I said blocks because of home, family, body. That will just transfer over pretty quickly to working through blocks, right? Using the Mars action and tool set to work through blocks of the home, aka solving problems in the home of our own or others, right? The mama bear protecting the brood, solving the problems of the children, solving the problems of how to protect the children properly, how to nurture the things that we're birthing or that have been born, tending to the physical body. This eclipse, that's what I was saying earlier, a great opportunity to rest and tend gently to the body and prioritize that tending. Saturn and Pisces, in a sea of confusion without a rudder and resource, yes, okay, maybe. But the other side, releasing the need to control and going into new territory to discover unknown structure and foundation. It's the side of Saturn and Pisces where we get to creatively find new ground, right? This what Saturn is in the ancient text. It's ship careers, people, it's sailors. And these guys would go explore. I mean, they would get on the boat and find a new island and find other communities to trade with. I mean, it very much was both an unknown and confusion when you're out on the sea, but simultaneously the opportunities to build whole new realities. Marco Polo is an example, you know, the networks of connection between Asia and Europe that happened. This is Pluto and Aquarius in the 16th century. You had the Marco Polo event, so we're kind of resonant with that now. But with all the new technology and everything that's happening geopolitically and the rearrangements, the notion here is we're discovering a new structure using the creativity. We turn down the hardcore Saturn and we turn up the Piscean and Jupiterian. And it's the opportunity of Saturn and Pisces. And then finally here, Moon in Scorpio, I was saying trauma, bodily and emotional, but that gives way to the most powerful aspects of the Scorpionic in my view, which are empathy. Number one thing with Scorpio, they can deeply feel and receive people and understand through empathy what it's like to be in pain. Healing in spaces that need them, so you can bring the empathy and the healing and the awareness and depth of beingness around suffering and trauma into other spaces, right? And that's the Moon-Mars mutual reception here, using our empathetic powers and maybe our past traumas to come in and act within the people that we're responsible for today and the nurturing that we can do with people around us. Like this is that looping mutual reception, water trine with Mars in Cancer, Moon in Scorpio during this eclipse. Some of the powers here symbolically. And what I have here, intimacy with the often unseen and unheard. So just what I was saying, being intimately familiar with things that we don't like to talk about as a society because maybe it's less glamorous, but very, very real. AKA our trauma, AKA our sadness and pain. It's the continuum of exploration that really does make a fullness of an astrological delineation. And I'm glad we could do a little bit of that for this eclipse chart. I'm thinking more than anything, you might just feel into what I'm saying. It doesn't even have to be an intellectual knowledge, and just try to, maybe some of you, it's describing or giving voice to where you may be at. And like I said, I know for me, the last few days, I've just been kind of like, what? And riding through this eclipse to get to the other side. It's why astrology is powerful. Knowing that there's a Mercury retrograde, knowing it's eclipse season, it really has given me context for the things I've been going through and feeling. So I'm shifting out of the eclipse chart conversation, and now we're in the video, we're part of the video where I'm going to talk about this next 14 days before this new moon in Taurus. And the main stuff here I have, but post-eclipse softening is a major theme. We get through all this really deep, intense stuff I just described, but we get this softening that comes in right away almost. It's the major theme of this next little pocket of astrology. Pisces, Taurus, and Cancer. Those three so-called night sex signs, 2 water and 1 earth. Those signs are in earth, water, sign, sextiles, and at 1 trine. And it's this soft prize of recuperation after the fight of eclipse season, after the struggles of eclipse season. We get this place to land and rest and recuperate. This is the major vibe for the next year, actually, that arrives here quite quick upon Jupiter's entry into Taurus on 16 May. You get Saturn and Pisces, sextile Jupiter and Taurus. Saturn now has the supportive reception of its very creative ruler that's in the creative earth sign. And then auspiciously activated while Venus is in Cancer. That happens on 7 May, 2 days after this eclipse. And I wish I'll do a whole video on, we could just talk about Venus and Cancer, but I'm gonna move fast, I'm gonna have full coverage here. It's 7 May, Venus enters Cancer and kicks off that beginning of this major so-called feminine sign sextile trine or relationship. One of the most creative pockets I think that we'll have this year. So we're waning into the best astrology of the year. Like I said, post-eclipse, the moon begins waning. And I wanna come right now to Venus and Cancer, 7 May to 5 June 2023. The reason why it's so important, if you just look at the technical astrology here, Venus and Cancer will be ruled by exaltation, Jupiter and Taurus. Jupiter and Taurus ruled by domicile by Venus and Cancer. So it's a very supportive sextile-based mutual reception between our two benefic planets, Venus and Jupiter, in two signs that, again, are so-called feminine. Well, what's Taurus is the generativity of the natural world and how that can inspire our own creative impulse and how we can rest in a state of nature on like a laurel, for example, and just rest and relax. I think about painters. You see pictures of painters in like the 19th, early 20th century. They're just hanging out like on the banks of the Seine River and they're just painting all day in nature. They kind of become one with nature and then begin to create as a result of that connective fusion, being in it, creating from a place of knowledge of it. That is how I see Jupiter in Taurus and Taurus energy in general. But to have then the Venus in Cancer, what is Cancer? I know we can simplify that: body, mother, and home. But it goes way beyond that. And I talk about this a lot. It's the nature of being itself. It's the higher octave of all that is, what does it mean to be alive? What matrix am I born from and born into? What is the nature of the home of consciousness with these bigger scale questions? That's all the pure Cancerian. That's why I love Cancer ultimately. There's no way for me to deny the Cancer energy because of how much it hits to the core of what is reality, and it begs those explorations. So when you're creating from the place of nature, and then you have these kind of core questions of the matrix that we're contained in, the kind of womb that we're always being born out from, in terms of like a collective energy or the true structure of being and nature of reality, you see how creative the combination can be, because a lot of the best art is coming from that place of wanting to go into those deeper spaces. What is reality itself? And so this, to me, is the key creative theme. Get out there, whatever you're going to be doing this next few days. Get into nature, first of all, would be my primary advice. If you are a creative or an artist, really good time to go to some core themes with your work and give yourself maybe a less dynamic in terms of like no fire or air sign. The masculine signs are turned way down now. And look in this chart, no traditional planet is even in a masculine sign on 17 May upon the entry of Jupiter into Taurus. And that just might mean that we focus more on the non-doing side of the creative process. You know, the painter sitting in nature, waiting for that light to emerge to get that color right. Or if you're a photographer, you know, doing kind of Piscean style, non-restrained brainstorming sessions with the words on the page, where it's not something that has an end in place or a particular form that's predetermined. You know, you can do all of that here. And you look where Saturn is. By exaltation, Saturn is ruled by Venus in Cancer. So look at that. It's received by its exaltation lord via water trine. And then by domicile, Saturn is received by Jupiter, its domicile lord in Taurus. And so you can see just how supportive. This is why I'm hyped up, the technical side. These planets rule each other and are in looping mutual receptions. And so if Saturn and Pisces have been tough for you so far, wait for this. Wait for 7 May to 5 June, Venus in Cancer, and then of course 16 May, Jupiter into Taurus. It kicks off this free-flowing creative moment. And I'm totally pumped about it. This is like my favorite astrology of the year. All right, a chart example to underscore what I've just said, this relationship between Taurus, Cancer, and Pisces. The best chart example you might find for this, Frida Kahlo, okay? One of the most important artists of the 20th century, one of the most inspirational artists in terms of the global collective currently and in the last 20, 30 years, a real inspiration. She had Saturn in Pisces, so it's her Saturn return. The moon in Taurus, so it's not Jupiter in Taurus, but it's the exalted moon in Taurus. And then you have Jupiter in Cancer. So in Frida's chart, she just has the Jupiter ruled by the moon in Taurus, and that is that connection between Cancer and Taurus. Not exactly the same as the transits we're about to get, but pretty darn close. I mean, an exalted moon in Taurus and then an exalted Jupiter in Cancer. That Jupiter ruled by the moon. And of course, Saturn and Pisces being ruled by Jupiter in Cancer. So again, we get this through reception, a real accentuation of these three signs I've just been describing. Maybe three of the most creative signs there are: Taurus, Pisces, and Cancer. And so her chart is highly resonant with this moment of astrology we're about to enter. So Frida brought these innovations around using the body as the central trope maybe, or the central focus of an artistic body of work, which is lunar, right? Moon in Taurus, exalted moon in Taurus, her body and in her 10th house. This is my favorite chart example, maybe one or two. Any writing I do about techniques, and I do plan to do that at some point, this will be a core in terms of what I want to center, because it works so well. Perfect chart, amazing woman, an amazing artist. But exalted moon in the 10th, art about the body, that's Taurus, and that's the moon. Art about the body, it's perfect. That's her career, that's her reputation, what she's known for. Venus in Cancer idea as well, because the moon in Taurus is the body moon ruled by Venus. Venus in Cancer, the transit we're about to hit on 7 May through 5 June, is Venus, the creative art, ruled by the moon and the lunar. So you might think about selfies during this time, and that might seem a little mundane, but selfies are a great art. Cindy Sherman, the selfie photographer, before selfies were a thing, Cindy Sherman was doing all kinds of pictures of herself to express art and deep art ideas about culture and identity. That could be in play here, but look at the other part of the surrealism of her work. You can see, like in these pictures, you look at the way the leaves look kind of strange and surreal. These monkeys that were eating with her. These aren't maybe the best examples. I think the way that the plant has grown around her body, that could be part of the surrealism. But some of the paintings are extremely surreal. Stuff you would never see naturally. She's painted into these images of her body and herself. The images of her, you can find these paintings where like she's half alive or the skeleton is prominent as a result of her accident. This is Saturn in Pisces in my view. It's the former structures of what is conservative or formalized. Those things get washed in the Piscean seas, and it's a real opportunity this whole next several year period until February 2026, Saturn leaves Pisces finally, to come into an abandonment of what you think things should be like, what your art should be like, how you should create. All that gets thrown out now. You can do anything. And this is why I think the AI tools are so powerful, because they really do allow for extensions of things that were maybe not conceivable to come online in terms of a tool of artistic production. I know some of you hate AI. Trust me, get it. It's just a tool. It's like a brush. Did you hate the camera when it was invented? Did you hate certain brushes when they were invented? Because that's all it is a tool. And people are going to do some amazingly creative works of art using that tool as a part of a toolbox of creative, a toolbox of creativity. So the next big theme of what happens here after the lunar eclipse is, of course, this little pocket in May, and this is one of my tweets from this week. 15 May, Mercury stations direct in Taurus. 16 May, Jupiter enters Taurus. And then 19 May, you have a new moon in Taurus, the first syzygy after eclipse season, which is really the beginning of the post-eclipse season world, that first new moon or full moon. And all of this happens with Venus forming a supportive sextile from Cancer. And so mid-May really does usher in this major Taurian moment with an inundation of Taurus energies. And so it really demands that we saturate here and talk about Taurus and the symbol of Taurus and what it means. Mercury is details. It's there hanging out in Taurus. It's like telling us, hey, talk about Taurus. So I'm going to do some of that in this video. And then in the next video, when I break down that new moon in Taurus, I'm going to use some other sources. We're going to dig very deep into Taurus right now because of everything that's conglomerating there planetarily. And Jupiter's worldview. What's the Taurian worldview? That might be what Jupiter into Taurus is asking us to explore. And so again, back to April Elliott Kent. I'm going to stay with this same source. And it's a point here of pedagogy as well. I mean, finding one or two books that you can be with and get to know the writers is a great way to learn astrology. The thing is, like any astrologer that's written a good book like this, they're not going to be perfect, okay? April Elliott Kent doesn't encompass the totality of the Taurian, but it's going to be pretty darn good. This is an astrologer, a working astrologer who spent their life studying and putting all of this in a book. And so you can use this as a jumping off place. That's why I always include texts. They are the invitation into the symbol through someone who's basically a teacher. She's our teacher right now for purposes of this video. We're learning from her, April Elliott Kent, to then begin our own explorations. And you have your own understanding of this. This isn't something that's like an edict or some sort of juridical mandate. This is an invitation to explore. Okay, so let's get to the April Elliott Kent text. She says, Taurus the bull. April showers begin to subside. The days grow longer and warmer. Seeds begin to burst open into a riotous profusion of vegetables and flowers. These birds are hanging out in my apartment, singing all the time. Winter and its cold is over. It's a time of plenty, a time of pleasure. And you can see here where Venus is a symbol that is sex and sexual. Often when if you ever lived in a really cold city where snow shuts everything down. That spring emerges, and you go to like a bar, everybody's out just hunting for partners. When that first, when you get the injection of being able to walk around and be outside, there's a very communal thing that comes. And that's what Venus is. I say that because it's the core of the Venus nature. Venus's nature is the sensuality that winter prevents. The sensuality, because everything's bleak and destroyed and you're inside. It's only as spring emerges that you can venture out and deeply engage the senses. And the earth itself is doing it too, with the colors of the flowers and the birds and everything that she's describing here. And I will say, I know a lot of you are down under, okay, but we are talking about this, a material manifestation that can help us understand the symbol here. So this can apply to you too. There's sensual stuff going on down there, I guarantee it, down in fall. Like there's color changes even in fall with the beautiful browns and yellows of those leaves as they change. So she says here, after the mad scramble of spring planting, there's now time for leisure to let things be before the hard work of the harvest. So I don't know that much about that. I'm not that into farming. By the bull, but it isn't the season of hard work for beasts of burden. He stands happily in a verdant meadow, chewing grass and flirting with cows. The cow hangs out, if you've seen a cow. I've seen some recently, and they're just placid, eating, and that's all they were doing. And there was flowers all around the ones that I was seeing. It was like, this is Taurus. This guy's chilling and resting. This gal was. Finally, I just want to say here, she says, Taurus's main concern, food, shelter, and clothing, and physical health, and the fully functioning senses with which to enjoy it all. That's a key component here of Taurus as I understand it. Domicile Lord Venus, that's the senses and the enjoyment. Exaltation Lord Moon, that is the food, shelter, and clothing, and the physical health. You can see how you have to use exaltation lords to understand the full impetus and the full, injective power of a sign and its signification. You always have to bring those in. And you can't understand Taurus without knowing that the moon plays such a powerful role as its exaltation lord. And it's about the physical body, and then Venus, the sense pleasures of the physical body. That is the Taurian. Okay, and just to show you, here's where I was out recently where I live. I went into nature on a hike. Someone invited me. Look at that. It was so Taurian that day, and the sun was in Taurus for this, so I've been enjoying a lot of this Taurus season, just getting out into nature. Eventually went to like a water swimming hole, which was amazing. Refreshed water. You could drink right out of this water if you wanted to. So I was able to meet some of the local kids, and we had a great time just socializing and enjoying the fun of nature and the fun of spring together, coming out and being social. There's that cow. I saw a few, but this is the one that I got close to, and you see it's eating there. That's the Taurian, eating the grass and staying there. It's one of those stereotypes, of sinological stereotypes, of like Taurus is stubborn, and Taurus is just stubborn and only concerned about eating. You'll see that a lot, but you see it right there in nature. And I think it goes back again, Moon-Venus combinations. And I'm just going to play a couple of videos with some music here, very short. I promised the guys, I gave them my YouTube channel, and I promised I'd play these videos. They're jumping into the water, and we're kind of walking around there. So Jupiter in Taurus is a major shift for Saturn and Pisces themes. I've said that a couple of times. I just want to underscore it with this slide, because now Jupiter is sextile Saturn and more supportive. It's a Ptolemaic aspect. Jupiter can see Saturn, and therefore it can monitor and assist with the affairs of Saturn and Pisces. And in fact, Jupiter now will be able to see Saturn the rest of its transit. Saturn's transit in Pisces, it has reception from Jupiter the whole time. So you Saturn return folks out there, or anybody that's been struggling with Saturn and Pisces, it gets better now. You have reception from the domicile lord, the rest of that transit. You can connect the house topics in your natal chart. Let's say you are a Libra rising, like this chart example. You might be talking about workloads and discipline and just kind of the rigors of daily life with Saturn and Pisces getting accentuation. But now you have the assistance of other people's resources to help with that. Then you'll have the assistance of maybe foreign travel or spirituality or religion to help with that in 2024, 2025. And then you get career, like it's almost like for Libra risings, you're rising up to some kind of career capstone of the Saturn and Pisces transit. All the hard work you can put in, wait until 2025 when you get that 10th house transit. Just one way to read. You can do this with your own chart and the house topics that you're engaged in. What do I have here? Both are ruled by Venus, so it's a very creative time, especially with Venus in Cancer. I've gone through all that already in this video. Healing and settling, the fixed axis. 2023 is a transitioning from eclipses there. So remember, all of 2022, it was eclipses with Saturn and Aquarius squaring Taurus and Scorpio eclipses. And you can see here how in 2023 with Jupiter into Taurus, it really settles the fixed axis. Now the nodes are still there. They'll be there until July. They shift out of Scorpio Taurus. One more eclipse in October in Taurus. But you can think of like November, December, January, February, March, April, May, 7 months. No nodes in Taurus. And no eclipses there, and Jupiter is hanging out, settling and healing. So just keep that in mind. Your Taurus sector, if you struggled in 2022, major theme of 2023 is those struggles diminishing and this kind of healing Jupiterian coming in the luscious, physically sensual sign of Taurus. So here's one key point from the mundane world. Saturn and Jupiter have a 59-year cycle. Or Saturn Jupiter has a 59-year cycle, depending on how you want to write that. And what that means is that when Saturn was in Pisces and Jupiter was in Taurus the last time, it was 1964-65. I believe it was late 64 into 65. Those exact dates I'm not going to show here. But from a mundane astrological perspective, it's a core technique. Always go back 59 years ago. That's going to tell you what this year will be like. 2 musical albums, I think, are embodying the themes of this video. A Love Supreme by John Coltrane. It's a very spiritual album of jazz, of free jazz, one of the most important jazz records on a lot of people's lists of best record of all time. You know, Coltrane was a creative innovator, both in terms of the spiritual content of the music, but also the sheets of sound, which that came before this album. This was an album of the kind of total art project where it all comes together in this one album offering. And so it's the innovations with the saxophone and innovations with jazz. And another great example of this is the album Bringing It All Back Home by Bob Dylan, 1965 studio release. Both of these are released with Jupiter and Taurus, Saturn and Pisces. This is the record where Dylan is like rapping for the first time, Subterranean Homesick Blues, those lyrical expansions. No one had heard this stuff when Dylan made it. This was like surrealism. You go back to the Frida Kahlo surrealism. You go back to lyrical surrealism. You go back to electric music. This was an album where half was electric, half was acoustic. And so it was part of this transition using those new electric instrument technologies and recording technologies of the mid-1960s. Dylan was at the forefront, pushing the boundaries creatively and coming into these new vistas. People had not heard, go put on Subterranean Homesick Blues and just listen to it. What is it? My favorite line from it is, what did he say? Don't follow leaders and watch your parking meters. Don't follow those leaders. That's good for the election cycle. but no, seriously, it's quite innovative. And these are the kinds of creative things we can have access to, resonances here in your own life and your own creative life during this period, which begins now, 16 May, in between this full moon eclipse and then the next new moon. So one more work of creative art I want to bring in that I do feel like is highly resonant with what's happening in the world right now. Remember the Hierophant in the Tarot system is the corresponding card for Taurus. And so Taurus does imply something about the higher echelons of society, one that can afford to lay around and eat all day like that cow. Rich people, or there's a leisure class, a moneyed class that can, buy expensive jewelry, that are often connected to the established power structures of the society, which is why I think the Hierophant is so appropriate when you talk about one aspect of Taurus. Look, this Pope, as it's called, also has all gold and gold staffs and servants around him and robes that are flowing and colorful. It's very much the idea that the power structure will be pleasure-oriented, especially in the dark sides of it. And that's what I want to bring in here, that kind of dark Taurus, you might call this. And bring in the Stanley Kubrick film, Eyes Wide Shut. So late May sees the second Jupiter return of Eyes Wide Shut, released in '99. Jupiter in Taurus, early degrees of Kubrick's final masterpiece. But this is what the film explores. Go put it on if you haven't seen it. sex, desire, dreams, and reality. So that's Taurian in a certain way, that Jupiter is the non-tangible often. It's like the pleasure that comes from the higher visions. So maybe that's where we're getting the dream component of Jupiter and Taurus. Finding justice within networks of power. That's a key component of the Hierophant style energetic of Taurus. Jupiter is justice. Networks of power are Jupiter as well. All relevant Jupiter and Taurus considerations. You can see in this chart, Jupiter enters Taurus and then is squaring immediately Pluto and Aquarius, immediately upon its entry. So 16 May starts a Jupiter and Taurus, Pluto and Aquarius square. What is Pluto? It's the plutocracy. It's the deep, true nature of the control system, right? Those who are in that upper echelon, who are really controlling society. I think in America, you're talking about the Fortune 500. That's not controversial. The lobbying that goes on, the continuity of networks that are unelected behind the scenes, all of that's Pluto and the Plutonic. With Jupiter squaring, look for these stories to come out, maybe more eyes wide shut style exposés. I mean, just this week we had the release of Epstein papers, more of the flight logs or his, I think, personal calendar, and all of these names came out. Noam Chomsky, that we didn't know were formerly connected, are now directly connected to Epstein. That's all eyes, Jupiter and Taurus, justice in these echelons of power networks squaring Pluto and Aquarius. So look for that. It's majorly on my radar over the next period, but particularly here, post-eclipse season right here into late May. Occupy Wall Street was a Jupiter and Taurus phenomenon, and the Battle of Seattle, the WTO protests, were all planned during this same summer that Eyes Wide Shut was released. Jupiter was back in Aries during the protests, but all of the planning happened when Jupiter had been in a Taurus. So it's this justice around wealth, justice around ostentation, justice around the hierarchies, and how we see where is pleasure and how is that distributed in the society. I'm thinking this would be a major theme to arrive here very, very soon. And in your own life, I mean, how are you dealing with money and pleasure and power and all of those things as they may be emergent? What do you do if you get more money? How do you spend it? If you don't have enough, what about the ideas about resources and how Jupiter can come reformulate sometimes our mentalities? So pivoting now to the election part of these videos I've been doing, 3 charts I want to highlight before the next new moon in Taurus. This first one is the final Sagittarius moon trine Jupiter. And it brings into mind the expansions of self over the last year. That's Jupiter in Aries. They get another final jolt here. And I think this would be a lovely chart, a fire trine. Look where this Sagittarius moon is somewhat away from Saturn and Pisces. So that square isn't as operative here, maybe in the later degrees. Mars is in the mix, squaring Jupiter as it's getting closer to Jupiter, so maybe that adds a flavor to things. But still, it's a ping of Jupiter in Aries by the moon, the translator of light. And I think it's good to just consider what happened May through October 2022, December 2022, through now, through May 2023, around your Aries sector, around the actions you've taken with a renewed sense of who you are and what you're here to do, and then acting from that knowledge. Honoring who you are, who you are beginning, maybe taking risks based on those new formulations. We've just had that eclipse in Aries. We're settling in now here post-eclipse season. The moon will trine Jupiter in Aries, being ruled by Jupiter in Aries, the moon in Sagittarius. Maybe there's a little bit of a risk-taking based on, hey, yeah, this is who I am. These are my powers. Let's go for it. I could see that transit being supportive of something like this. The Mars-Jupiter reception is still juicy, so I was just speaking about that a second ago. Home and family playing a role in self-action. So while you have that Mars in Cancer, this could be protecting the brood, or maybe it's time to take the brood out, or enjoy some of the Cancerian with Mars and Jupiter in this applying mutual reception. Actually, it won't perfect. It's not going to perfect before Jupiter enters Taurus, but it's still a bi-sign square that perfects later. I think here, it's like taking the kids to Disneyland or going to the park where you had the home base, but now you move it out into maybe nature, and you move it maybe out into another location that feels like a safe place to do some family time. Or maybe there's been changes in the family with Mars and Cancer, and this is the time to enjoy the new family and start acting with the new family. Whatever happened in eclipse season, both eclipses ruled by Mars and Cancer. Right here in the evening, in Central Europe, you get that moon in Sagittarius trine Jupiter in Aries, so 8 May in the evening. It'll be midday for those of you in North America and on 9 May in the morning there in Asia. Okay, next chart I'm interested in, 13 May 2023, 5:17, so very early in the morning here in Central Europe. This is the final Ptolemaic aspect that the moon perfects while Jupiter is in Aries, perfects to Jupiter. So it's this Aquarius moon that's completing the Jupiter cycle, this final aspect. And what is the Aquarius moon? It's mental models, long-term plans, innovations in terms of ideas. That is nice to have that connect with Jupiter and Aries for the final time of Jupiter's, time in Aries. A lot of that time with Jupiter and Aries had Saturn and Aquarius. So this may be revisiting some of that 2022, innovative self that emerged with that transit. It bleeds into the creativity the rest of the year with Saturn and Pisces ruling the moon in Aquarius. And you can see this Aquarius moon, the domicile lord is Saturn and Pisces. So it's hard, any Aquarius transits now automatically point us to the creativity and the surrealism of Saturn and Pisces. So we're kind of bleeding into this setup here. The moon connects to Jupiter, but that moon has that Saturn and Piscean expression. And then, of course, what is this? 3 days later, Jupiter enters Taurus to then directly connect with Saturn and Pisces. So this might be a little bit of bleeding into what's about to launch here. This is the final chart I'm going to bring up. I knew I had it here. Earlier, I started talking about this, but I'm going to just touch on it briefly here. It's 17 May. And this is the conjunction of the moon to Jupiter in Taurus. The moon does not conjoin Jupiter until it enters Taurus, and it happens on 17 May, 1537, Central Europe, so I think it's about 4 p.m. This chart isn't the chart of the exact conjunction, it's a few minutes before, but moon in Taurus hits Jupiter out of the gate when Jupiter's in Taurus, and so it does provide a direct lunar trigger as the transmitter of light, and the connective power of the moon directly hits Jupiter while it is now squaring Pluto in Aquarius. Look at that. 0 degrees, 18 degree minutes, Pluto in Aquarius, Jupiter, 0 degrees, 11 degree minutes. That square is going to be perfected here very, very soon. And so it's front running this T-squares with Mars and Leo. That will be the next video, a big breakdown of that T-square chart, one of the major specific aspects and charts of 2023, because Mars is about to enter Leo and then kick off the T-square with Jupiter in Taurus and Pluto in Aquarius, but we're already triggering it here in 17 May, midday, with the moon's entry into Taurus. And I just wanted to point out here, here's Sagar Enjeti. You may have seen him, popular YouTuber, political YouTuber, and he was tweeting out here, the Alphabet agency director met with Epstein in 2014. He claims he had no idea who he was. And he goes through this private calendar list, and I think that's what's going to get triggered. More stories around that, potentially with this T-square, fallout from that. This could be, again, the Hierophantic class, the class of elegance and leisure, now having to confront these societal kind of truths as we are seeing them and as they're exposed. And just a quick word, and you mean in your own life, it's like your own relationship to pleasure and materiality, and how Pluto and Aquarius is maybe transforming that with some new, innovations into how the possessions you have around you, or the meaning of those possessions. These are all major themes as well in our own lives. All right, that's it. Thanks for being here. Glad I got to do this video. Again, it was kind of a bit of a slog for me the last couple of weeks, and I'm keeping with this main tent pole for my channel of these 2 videos that can be longer. I do have other videos. Ideally, I'd like to have about 4 a month, one interspersed with each new moon and full moon video. There will be another one. It's already written. I've just been waiting to record it very soon on the presidential election. I know I said that last time. I'm going to say it again here. So you can go to my website, sjanderson144.com. As always, I've got a reading schedule that's listed there if you're interested in astrology reading. And have a great lunar eclipse. Take care of your body. Get into the earthy side, the needs of that physical, and extra care of nurturance during a time which can be very much destabilizing. So take care of yourself out there. I'll see you next time. Thanks for tuning in. Peace.